This week's lecture is entitled LAMP. If you might have noticed a pattern in the lectures, which is that they tend to have been kind of very practical, installing and maintaining web servers, interleaved with more theoretical discussions about web architecture on a larger scale. So, for example, last week we talked about loosely coupled architectures, which, whilst very relevant to everything we're studying, is perhaps a step away from the nuts and bolts of managing servers. This week we take a step back to the very practical stream of work, and we look at this thing, Linux, Apache, MySQL and PHP. This is pretty much entirely a practical session, driven by you. I'm going to set you a task and hopefully point you in the right direction, and then you're going to have a go at that. After the session, you should be, increasingly familiar with Linux as a web server environment, and you should be able to install and configure a deployed app. In this case, MediaWiki. This kind of task is something that you might well be expected to do. In a place of work, somebody might say, "Can you set me up a Drupal server, please? Can you set me up, in this case, a MediaWiki server?" So this is pretty much for an internal web system. Meat and potatoes task, if you like. So LAMP is very frequently occurring, and as I said, is short for Linux, Apache, MySQL and PHP. You'll also come across WAMP, Windows, Apache, MySQL and PHP, and XAMPP, which is an installable set of packages that you can use on Macs and on Windows as well. But for this lecture, very traditional LAMP. In order that we can all start from the same baseline, if you clear down everything in your ACS VM store area, and if you copy this image from my area, so that would be //ACES VM store users ACESII/WebArch. I've set up a VMware image which is basically everything that you did in week 2 when you set up a Debian system, except it doesn't have a web server or a database or any of the other components. It just has a student user whose password is lowercase password as we set up, and that user has permission to use the sudo command, which we also looked at briefly in week 2. There are a few other bells and whistles with that VM. It has something called the VMware tools installed, which make it easier for you to cut and paste text from outside or from the host operating system into the guest operating system. At the end of week 2, I pointed you at a tutorial. If you did that tutorial, you should be fine this week, and if you didn't, then this is probably going to be, a lot of work for you. So I hope you did the prerequisites. The basic commands we're going to use through this process are the sudo command, so all this installation work needs to be done as the root user. We're going to use the cd command, change directory, ls, which lists the files in a directory. The primary tool we're going to use here, though, is something called apt, and apt is a package management suite for Debian. Most Unices have a package management variant, be that RPM, the Red Hat Package Manager, or APT in this case. When we used to install software on web servers, we used to download the source code and build it manually. There were 2 really bad problems with that. One was that web servers have lots of dependencies, so you would have to find out what the dependencies are, go and download the source code, and then build and install that, which those dependencies might have had dependencies, and we used to label this dependency hell. So keeping track of all the dependencies is problematic, but a bigger issue was it's very difficult to know when a critical error or security problem has been fixed in a web server, or in any package in fact, and APT automates this process of letting you know that a critical update has been released for a particular component you're running. So this is a really useful tool for us, especially with managing web servers, where as soon as a vulnerability is detected, it's exploited. So we need to keep our servers up to date as much as we possibly can. And APT is a tool that gives us that. So the real advantage is with the auto update and auto configuration. So if possible, I'd suggest that you use a package management tool rather than building from source, because If you build from source, you're going to spend your entire life downloading updated versions and building and installing them. If you do find that you have to build from source, you're going to need the tar command, which is tape archive, and most Unix source packages are distributed as tar archives, so you'll see files that end in .tar or .tgz. And obviously this is a format that was originally used for digital media for tapes, but now it's used as a way of passing files around the internet. So the task I'm going to set for you basically is to install MediaWiki and to set up some pages. So MediaWiki is the oldest wiki system out on the internet. So Wikipedia, I think, uses MediaWiki. And if you go to the MediaWiki website, you'll see. Let's go to the main page there. You'll see that there's a download link and there's some system administration links here, installation notes, and here we go, installing, click on that, and somewhere here, prerequisites. So the prerequisites tell us that we need a web server, PHP and a database server, none of which we have at the moment. So if I switch to the notes for this week, the workbook, here we go then. Here's the Debian system image that you should have copied from my area, and I'm going to log in as student. My password is password, all lowercase. A quick note about passwords, we're going to have to set a password for the MySQL user as well in this session. Don't set passwords to password in production systems, obviously. That's a useful convention for us while we're in a learning environment that's safe, and we might forget passwords week on week. You know, that's a pure convenience for us. If you set passwords on production systems in a commercial environment to things like password, I imagine in most organisations that will be a disciplinary offence. It's simply not acceptable. So in a production environment, make sure that you set proper passwords, okay? To do anything else will be negligent. So, quick word of warning. I'm just going to System Preferences, Monitors, up the display resolution a little. There we go. That's a little bit better, I think. And terminal. Add that to the launcher. Okay, so I'm going to become root. Okay, so you'll have remembered the sudo command. Sudo space minus, sudo space su switch user space minus space root. So as the administrator, switch users to the root user, and the minus means give us a full root environment. So prerequisites, a web server, and I think if we click on this you'll see it says the most installations use the Apache web server. Okay, and we also know we need PHP. So in the notes, we've done the first setup step here, become root. You can use this command called apt cache, which will search all the packages that you can possibly install. Because VMware Tools is installed here, I should be able to reasonably easily cut and paste between my host OS and my guest OS, which is how I put this command in there then. So this is the command which has searched for the term Apache 2 in the package list, and you can see there are loads of Apache modules. You could scan the MediaWiki documentation to figure out exactly which ones you need, but in order to save you the trouble there, I've listed them here. We need Apache 2, which is the web server itself, and libapache 2 mod PHP 5 for our web server. But actually, we also need the MySQL adapter to talk to the database that we're going to install in the next step. So we might as well do that now, giving us the final command, apt-get install, and then the modules. So I'm going to paste that into my root shell here now. What's happened is that apt has said, oh, actually the packages you've asked me to install, there are some dependencies that are needed in order to install those, and these are those dependencies, and I'm going to go ahead and install those for you if you tell me you want to. So it's asking as if we want to continue here, and here's the summary of everything that's going to be installed. So if we were doing this by hand and with source code, we'd have had to go and fetch downloads for all these packages and compile them and install them before we can do the work of building Apache itself. So you can see APT is giving us quite a lot here. So I say yes. Excuse me. Okay, and if I look through here, you'll see a message that says reloading web server config Apache 2. So I think if I start a browser up and go to localhost, yeah, you can see the It Works page, which is the one you edited in week 2, just to prove that you really had a web server. So we have a web server. This is great. If you remember, the default web server files when we install this are in /var/www, and you can see, so this directory /var/www is the root of our web server. So when we go to /localhost/, that's the directory that we're seeing. Essentially we're seeing the files and directories in there, and we can see this index.html, which is the web page that came up. So we've got our Apache 2 installed, which is what you had in week 2 as well. The next dependency was MySQL. So you might have noticed these package names sometimes have version numbers in them, so you can ask APT to install very specific versions of things. If you just want to have a MySQL database server that's always up to date with the latest released version, you'd use something called a meta package, and as it happens, there are meta packages for MySQL called MySQL Server and MySQL Client, and if we install those, then APT will get the latest released version and know that you always want to upgrade. So that's what we're going to use here. So you need to use APT now to install MySQL Server and MySQL Client. Having already given you the command for Apache 2 here, you should be able to work out what that's going to be, I would have thought. Might be worth having a go now before I type it in. Okay, so I'll show you what that command is now. So that's apt-get install MySQL-client and MySQL-server. And again, APT's come back and said, actually, I think that you need these dependencies, and you can see that it's converted the meta packages, MySQL Server and MySQL Client, into actual packages here, MySQL Server 5.1 and MySQL Server Core 5.1. And here are all the extra packages we're going to install, and this is the final list. So we're going to say yes, let's do that. Now, in order to administer a MySQL database, there's a root user. Don't confuse this with the root operating system user, although obviously they have some common ancestry. We need to set a root password. Remember, this is the MySQL root user password, not the operating system root user password. Because of the way this Debian's been installed, the root operating system user has been disabled, and the only way we can get to it is through the sudo command. So this is completely separate. It just happens that in the MySQL database we set up users in the same way that we would in SQL Server or in Oracle, and here we're setting up a root user for the MySQL database, and we're going to give it the name password. So the same caveat applies. Don't do this in production systems. In production systems, have a good secure password, that follows whatever organizational procedures you've got for naming passwords and storing them. So I'll type in password and password again. Okay, you can see this is APT doing all its work. So we've set up a MySQL database with a root user, root MySQL user, and the password for that user is password, all in lowercase. You'll see from the log messages, starting MySQL, and this is it starting, checking for corrupt, no, that's all fine. Okay, so this is telling us that MySQL install is completed okay, so we should check that that's installed. Before we do though, when we've completed this step, let's have a quick look. Installing, so sorry, just looking for the so this is the installation guide, and it says check your system meets the minimum requirements. Well, that's what we've just been doing, Apache and MySQL. And the second thing is to download MediaWiki. Now I could start the browser in my VM, but the other thing I can do is to use another tool. I'm going to right click on the download link and copy link address there. There's a command called wget, which is a different way of interacting with remote web servers. So instead of interacting through a web browser, I'm going to interact on the command line. I'm going to say wget, and then I'm going to paste in the URL that I want to download. So you can see here's the MediaWiki URL, and this is the final. This is the file, and it ends .tar.gz, so we know that this is a tape archive. And you can see wget has gone away and it started to download the MediaWiki distribution. So while that's still downloading, I'm going to do that was Shift Control and T, which will bring up another tab in the terminal window, so it's quite useful. We can have one session going here and we can do something in this second session. I'm going to get another root shell, sudo su space minus space root password. So MySQL, just to go back there, we should check that MySQL is running, and one way to do that is to use the MySQL command line client, and I type in MySQL. Okay, and it tells me access denied because I need to give a password. And if you remember, the root user's password was password. Most Unix commands you can say -help or -?, and it will tell you all the parameters that command accepts. And the important ones here are, you'll see a lowercase p, or minus lowercase p is for the password, or I can say minus password. And there should be a lowercase u, which is for the user. So I can say MySQL -u space root -p. If I don't put a password in here, it'll prompt me for it, so that's what I'm going to do, and the password was password. Okay, and we can see that we've got the MySQL database here. You get the copyrights, obviously, from Oracle, because Oracle now own MySQL. So, some MySQL commands that you might like to have a play with, you can say show databases. MySQL manages schemas and calls them databases, essentially. We could say use, which will allow us to switch between schemas, so we can use MySQL. The MySQL database listed here is essentially the set of system tables, so the meta tables for the database, if you like. I could say show tables, and here are all the meta tables that MySQL uses. So these are MySQL's tables about itself, essentially. You can see the permissions and the privileges tables. Let's have a look. There's a user table. I could select star from user. And there you can see all the users which the MySQL database knows about. So we're pretty sure, we're happy that we've got a working MySQL database there. That's good. Pardon me. So wget is still downloading our MediaWiki installation. It's nearly there. What we can do is we can have a quick think whilst it's finishing. We've got this tar.gz file, which basically is a zipped up distribution, and the quick installation guide says download MediaWiki and extract the archive to a web accessible folder on your server. So we already know that when we installed Apache using apt, the default web accessible folder is /var/www. So essentially we want to unpack this zip file, or this tar gz file, in /var/www. So if I use the pwd command here, you can see that I'm in /root at the moment, which is root's home directory. I'm going to cd /var/www, and you can see the index.html there. Now, if you've just installed a fresh Apache and you've installed some modules like mod.php in this case, you need to be sure that Apache has reloaded all those modules properly. So it's sometimes a good idea to restart Apache. So that's what we're going to do, just to make sure all the modules have been reloaded properly. And in order to do that, I'm going to say service space Apache2 space restart. And so the service command is a shortcut interface that lets us restart system daemons essentially. So service Apache2 restart, and it tells us that Apache has restarted. This is good news. What service is actually doing underneath the hood is, if we have a quick look in the directory /etc, which is where system level configuration files live, there's a directory called rc. There we go. Sorry, init.d. Yeah, /etc/init.d. There should be an Apache 2 file in there. This is actually the script which controls the startup of Apache. You don't need to know this, but you know, if you're particularly interested, and you can actually page through that script and you can see information about the run levels at which this thing starts and stops, and you can see how Apache starts up. You can actually go in there and edit that file if you want to. If you want to, as root, you can execute that file by hand. So you could actually just call that file and say stop, and that will cause Apache to stop, or you can call it and say start. Okay, this is exactly the same as saying service Apache2 stop, service Apache2 start. Calling the init scripts directly is a little bit more generic. All Unices have this in some form or another. The service interface is just a nice add-on that comes later on. So you can use either, it doesn't matter. So back to the task in hand, we need to unpack our MediaWiki file in /var/www. We downloaded it in /root, so if I do ls/root, that says list the files in the directory /root, and we can see there's our MediaWiki file. I'm going to say tar, tape archive command, and the parameters I need to give it are -x, which is extract. So extract the files from this tar archive. V, which is verbose output, because I want to see what work tar is doing, just so you can see it. Z means uncompress. So if I've got a .tar.gz file, that means it's a compressed tar archive, and I need to uncompress it in order to extract the files. So that's what the Z is doing. And finally F, which says, by the way, here's the file I would like you to extract the archive from. So I can say the file is /root/MediaWiki, and I'm just using tab autocomplete there so that you can save me typing it in basically. So I'm in the directory /var/www, and I'm saying please extract this file. What this will do is to extract it in the current directory. So this will extract a file from there and put it in /var/www. If I do an ls now, you'll see that we've got a directory called MediaWiki -1.19.2. That's cool. If we look at the instructions, actually, it says extract it to a folder called MediaWiki. MediaWiki 1.19.2 is not particularly snappy or easy to remember, so we're going to use the mv command, which is move, and we're going to move MediaWiki -1.19.2 to MediaWiki. Yeah. Do an ls now, and you can see that we've renamed that directory to something that's a little bit more human readable. So we've checked and installed all the minimum requirements, which was Apache Web Server, PHP modules, and a MySQL database. We've downloaded MediaWiki, and we've extracted it to a web accessible folder. We'll see that in a minute. And finally, point 3, point your browser to the directory where MediaWiki was extracted. Okay, so we need to do this inside the guest OS window now, because we're going to talk to the local web server. So, pardon me. Here's the web browser, and I'm going to go to http://localhost/MediaWiki. Okay, and what we've got is the MediaWiki homepage. So this is essentially index.php from that MediaWiki directory that we've just extracted. If when you do this, instead of seeing a web page, you get a download of the .php file, that's the situation where you should have restarted your Apache web server, because what's happened is the web server hasn't picked up the configuration for the PHP module. So if when you go to this URL you get a download instead of seeing an actual page, then you need to restart your Apache, and you probably need to clear your browser cache as well, because by that stage your browser thinks that a .php file is something to be downloaded rather than something to be rendered. So we've gone to where it says, and the fourth step here was follow the on-screen instructions. So it says MediaWiki 1.19.2 local settings PHP not found. Please set up the wiki first, and this is a hyperlink. So that's good. We'll set up the wiki. And this is the MediaWiki installation guide. So this is all automated. You've seen me do the full install process. It's asking us what our language is. British English. Yeah. Okay. Continue. And it's going to perform some environmental checks. PHP. It's telling us there are some modules missing that we really should use. It's looking for image magic. That's for image processing. That's good. So this all looks okay, I think. There are no big red pieces of text. I'm going to click continue. Okay, MediaWiki supports the following database systems, and because we've only got the MySQL driver installed in our PHP setup, the only type we can have is MySQL, so that's good. And it said localhost, that is where the database is. Database name, MyWiki, that's fine. Table prefix, we don't need one of those. Final piece of information, database username, root. So this is fine. We're going to use this. We're going to use the root user to install this. There are ways to ask MySQL to set up other user accounts. If you were doing this in a production system, you would probably set up a different username and password specifically for this task. But for now, we're going to just type in password, which was the root. The password we set for the root MySQL user when we installed MySQL. Continue. Okay, and it's asking us some information about the database that it's going to set up, and we're going to click My ISAM. So, two different choices. You don't really need to know the details. InnoDB is a very traditional relational database engine with lots of support for concurrency and locking, which are all good things you need if you're writing a particular class of application. For this particular application, the ISAM structure in MySQL is significantly faster, so we'll choose that, and we get to choose a database character set, binary or UTF-8. So this is to do with character sets. If you want your web application to be able to store character sets from other locales, other languages, Chinese character sets with diacritics, O, umlaut, for example, then really UTF-8 has got to be the choice. You know, for web applications, you want to be setting up databases that support UTF-8 character sets. Okay, that looks good. We'll continue. Name of wiki. So, why don't we call this WebArch? That's good. And project namespace, yeah, we'll have the defaults there. And finally, an administrator account. So I'm going to set this to student, and password, I'll let you guess that. And what I'm going to do is, you could use a real email address here if you wanted, but in fact I'll say root at localhost. That should be okay. Don't click these if you're using fake email addresses, obviously. Okay, ask me more questions, or I'm bored already, just install the wiki. So I'm just going to say install the wiki. That's our primary goal here. Okay, by pressing continue you will begin the installation, so we'll do that. Okay, and it's saying I'm doing all this work. Now then, this is, what's it saying? The installer has generated a local settings.php. It contains all your configuration. You will need to download it and put it in the base of your... So this is, you remember when we went to the front page and it said no local settings.php detected. It's saying this is the file you need. One tricky thing here is that I'm actually logged in as a student user, and this window has been opened using the student user, but only the root user has permission to write to /var/www. So what I'm going to do is to say file save as /tmp. So /tmp is a temporary file system where we can store things. I'm going to say save as /tmp/local settings.php, and I do that. Then if I go back to my root command prompt, I'll cd into the MediaWiki directory. So now I'm at /var/www/MediaWiki. What I can do is I can cp, which is the copy command, /tmp/local settings.php to dot, which is the current directory. So this command will copy this file from /tmp into the current directory, which is /var/www/MediaWiki. So we've done that. If you want to have a look through this file, feel free. You'll see all the configuration settings that you've gone through as you've gone through these dialogues, basically. You might find it interesting to have a look at that. Right, so download it, edit it, and when you've done that, it says we can enter our wiki. Okay, this is our MediaWiki homepage. What we can do is, we could look at the user's guide, I guess. Pretty boring stuff. There should be an edit link, so I'm going to click the edit link, and what I'm going to do is to say square bracket Ian's page, and I'm going to save that. And you can see, oh, that's not worked. Let's try that again, shall we? Okay, so if you're not familiar with the wiki syntax, two opening square brackets says here's a page in the wiki, and I've named that page Ian's page. I'll save that, and then I should be able to click on that. MediaWiki will realise that this is a page which didn't exist previously, and we can create it. So this is a stub. Ian's page. Blah, blah. And then let's say I want a web architectures link. Okay, I'll save that page. Okay, and so I've created a page in the wiki that's got some stub information and a link to a now non-existent page, Web Architectures 2012, and this is... Okay, so that's good, we'll save that. So I've created this page. One of the things that's worth looking at as we're playing with MediaWiki is looking at the URLs it's generating and thinking about that in the context of last week when we were thinking about service URLs. you can see how MediaWiki has named the page. It's not ideal actually, because we've got this index.php thing in there. We can get rid of that, but the more important thing is the last part here is /webarchitecture 2012, which is really, that's a good URL. People could remember that. You'd stand a good chance of guessing it if you were coming back to this page a second time. Back to the main page now. You'll see that because I've created these pages now, they're no longer red. They're just ordinary links, and you can follow them. So what I'd like for you when you get to this stage is put some content into your own wiki page. Just have a play with it, get used to using the wiki, but then also you might want to have a look around the directory structure. You could have another play with the index.html. Maybe you could make your index.html, which is this page, have a link to your MediaWiki instance. So that's on MediaWiki. Yeah. So that is where I would like you to be at the end of this week. Be able to do this whole process end to end, and if you like, have a go at it, and then clear down your ACS VM store area, recopy the image from my area, and redo the install. Just get comfortable with it. Don't just, get through it by the skin of your teeth and then think, phew, that was a close one. Make sure that you can actually do this as a repeatable process. I think one of the things that we'll talk about later on in the semester that are really important for businesses and for web services are repeatable processes. It's not enough to get through it once by the skin of your teeth. You need to be able to do it again and again and again. And obviously, one way we like to do that is by scripting, because we don't want everything to be a manual process. But you should be comfortable with this, not just scrape your way through it. So that's an installed MediaWiki system. I'm probably going to give out an assignment next week, which will be something along these lines. It won't be installing MediaWiki, but it will be setting up a different web application and setting up some pages in it. So it's worth putting the effort in, getting comfortable with this. Okay, I will see you in the week. Thanks a lot.